Have you ever wondered if it's really wise to remarry after 70? On the surface, it sounds so romantic, two people in their later years, sitting side by side on a park bench, laughing, holding hands, sharing their remaining years together. Society tells us, love has no age limit. And yes, companionship is one of the greatest needs of a human heart, no matter how old we are. But here's the part no one talks about. Experts in senior life and aging say that remarriage after 70 can sometimes cause more pain than joy. It can bring financial losses, emotional conflicts, and even shocking consequences that many seniors never imagine when they walk down the aisle a second time. So let me ask you a few honest questions. If you found love again at 72, would you risk everything you built over a lifetime for it? If remarrying meant losing your children's trust or even your family home, would you still go ahead? And what if the person you married wasn't who you thought they were? What if they brought more stress than comfort into your final years? Today, we're talking about 5 shocking reasons why seniors should think twice before remarrying after 70. And trust me, all of them are important, but the last reason is the most shocking and the most important one of all. So stay with me till the end, because you don't want to miss it. But before we start, I want to hear from you. Would you remarry after 70 if you had the chance? Or do you believe companionship without marriage is enough? Comment your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe, because these are the conversations that can protect your health, your wealth, and your peace of mind. Now, let's dive in. Reason number 1. The hidden financial and inheritance risks of remarrying after 70. Have you ever stopped to think about what really happens to your money, your house, and your inheritance if you decide to remarry after 70? Most people don't. We think about companionship, about having someone to share meals with, about laughter and comfort in our golden years. But we rarely think about the financial consequences until it's too late. Senior life experts warn that remarriage is not just an emotional decision, it's a financial contract. And at 70 plus, this contract can completely change who owns your home, who inherits your savings, and even who controls your wealth after you pass away. Here I tell you story of Margaret. Margaret was 72 years old, a widow with 2 loving daughters. She owned a beautiful little house, the very home she and her late husband had bought 40 years earlier. In her will, she clearly left that house and her savings to her daughters. She believed everything was safe and legally protected. But then, Margaret fell in love again. She remarried, thinking it was a new chapter of happiness. She never changed her will, because she thought it wasn't necessary. But when she passed away, the law gave her new husband automatic spousal inheritance rights. That meant the house went to him, not her daughters. When he died a few years later, he left the house to his children from a previous marriage. Margaret's daughters were left with nothing, not even the family home they grew up in. Can you imagine the heartbreak? A lifetime of hard work and saving vanished into the hands of strangers. All because Margaret didn't realize remarriage would override her will. Why does this happen? Because marriage isn't just about love. It's about law. When you marry, your new spouse automatically gains certain rights over property, over inheritance, over joint assets. And unless you take very complex legal steps, those rights often outweigh what you've written in your will. So even if you've spent your entire life planning carefully for your children and grandchildren, remarriage can completely change where your legacy ends up. Experts say this is one of the top regrets of seniors who remarry. They think their assets are protected by a will. They think their family won't have to fight. But remarriage rewrites the rules. And here's the hardest question you must ask yourself: do you want your lifetime of work to support your children and grandchildren, or are you willing to risk it being redirected to someone else's family? Because love may feel priceless, but the truth is, remarriage can cost your family everything. Reason number 2. Loss of survivor benefits and pensions. One of the biggest mistakes seniors make when remarrying after 70 is believing that their income will stay the same. But here's the truth: remarriage can strip away pensions, survivor benefits, and even Social Security income that you've relied on for years. Think about it. Many widows and widowers depend on the survivor benefits of their late spouse. These benefits were earned through decades of work, sometimes military service, sometimes government jobs, sometimes private pensions. But in many cases, the moment you say, "I do," again, those benefits vanish. Let me give you a real-life example. Mary was 74 years old, a widow living comfortably on her late husband's military pension and Social Security survivor benefits. For more than a decade, this income had given her stability enough to cover her bills, her medicines, and even occasional treats for her grandchildren. Then, she fell in love again. It was sweet, it was unexpected, and it felt like a blessing. At 74, she thought, why not? Life is short, and I deserve happiness. She remarried quietly, surrounded only by a few friends. But what Mary didn't know was that by remarrying, she lost her survivor benefits. The pension her husband had worked for his entire life was gone. The Social Security survivor payments stopped. Overnight, her monthly income dropped by more than half. Suddenly, Mary was struggling to pay bills. She had to downsize her home. Vacations with the grandchildren became impossible. The love she found was real, but so was the financial burden. She often said, "If I had known this before, I would have thought twice." This is not just Mary's story, it's the story of thousands of seniors every year. Benefits that once gave security can vanish the moment you remarry. And here's the painful irony, many seniors remarry for stability and companionship, yet end up more financially insecure than they ever were alone. So before saying yes to late-life marriage, ask yourself, am I ready to give up my survivor benefits? Can I live comfortably without that pension? And is love enough to replace the financial safety net I may lose? Reason number 3. Higher risk of exploitation and elder abuse. Senior life experts say that after the age of 70, the chances of being financially or emotionally exploited through remarriage rise dramatically. Why? Because as we age, we often become more trusting, more vulnerable, and sometimes, more desperate for companionship. Unfortunately, not everyone who enters a late-life marriage does so with pure intentions. Let me share a story that captures this risk clearly. There was a gentleman named Robert, 78 years old, who had been widowed for almost a decade. He was lonely but financially stable. He owned his house outright, had a decent pension, and savings tucked away for his children. One day, he met a woman, younger by about 15 years, who showed him affection and care. Within a year, they were married. At first, things seemed perfect. She cooked for him, took him to doctor's appointments, and even made him feel young again. But slowly, subtle changes appeared. She convinced him to add her name to his bank account, just in case. She persuaded him to change his will, saying, "Don't you want to make sure I'm taken care of if something happens to you?" His children noticed, but by then, Robert was too emotionally tied to her to see the red flags. When Robert's health declined, she gained more control. She sold some of his possessions, withdrew money from his accounts, and distanced him from his children, claiming they were only after his money. Within a few years, Robert's savings were gone, his children felt betrayed, and after his passing, they discovered he had left nearly everything to her. This isn't just one story, it's a pattern experts see far too often. Older adults remarry with trust and hope, while some partners enter with calculation and greed. It's a bitter truth, remarriage after 70 can sometimes open the door to manipulation, financial abuse, and heartbreak at the hands of someone who never truly loved you. Ask yourself, at this stage in life, do you need a legal tie that could put your entire lifetime of hard work at risk? Or would companionship without marriage keep your heart safe and your family's future secure? Because one wrong step here can erase decades of savings, damage lifelong family bonds, and leave you with regret in your final years. Reason number 4. Health and caregiving burdens. You see, love may feel light, but illness is heavy. At this stage of life, health can change in a moment. A stroke, dementia, heart problems, mobility issues, these are realities many seniors face. And when you remarry, you're not just gaining companionship, you may be taking on the legal and moral responsibility of caring for a sick partner. Let me share a real story. James was 72 when he met Linda, a 70-year-old widow. They were both lively, full of humor, and seemed to bring each other back to life. Their families were happy for them, and within a year they decided to remarry. In the beginning, everything felt like a second spring: dinners out, walks in the park, travel, laughter. But 3 years into the marriage, Linda suffered a severe stroke. Overnight, James's world turned upside down. Instead of spending his golden years in relaxation, James became a round-the-clock caregiver. He managed her medications, helped her to the bathroom, cooked, cleaned, and drove her to endless doctor visits. He loved Linda dearly, but the stress was crushing. His own health began to decline: high blood pressure, exhaustion, depression. He often whispered to a friend, "I never thought I'd spend the rest of my life in hospitals and waiting rooms. I wanted a partner, not another responsibility." This is the harsh truth: in your 70s, remarriage can easily turn into a caregiving contract. The dream of companionship can transform into physical, emotional, and financial strain. Many seniors underestimate just how draining caregiving can be at that age. And here's the heartbreaking part: sometimes the love that brought two people together begins to crack under the weight of constant illness. The relationship shifts from romance to duty, and resentment silently creeps in. Now ask yourself, are you ready to become a caregiver again in your later years? Do you have the strength physically and emotionally to handle that burden? And is it fair to your own health to take on such responsibility when you should be resting and enjoying the time you have left? Companionship is beautiful, yes. But at this age, you must be brutally honest: remarriage can sometimes mean trading freedom for responsibility, and joy for exhaustion. Reason number 5. Family tensions and emotional fallout. You see, adult children usually carry deep emotions about their parents' remarriage. Sometimes it's fear of losing inheritance. Sometimes it's the thought of a stranger replacing the memory of their late mother or father. And sometimes, it's simply the feeling of being pushed aside in their own family. Here's a story that shows this reality clearly. Margaret was 74 when she remarried Harold, a widower of 76. They were both kind, gentle souls, and to them, marriage felt like the right step. But Margaret's 2 daughters didn't see it that way. To them, Harold wasn't a loving companion: he was an outsider stepping into their family. At first, the tension was silent. Her daughters stopped visiting as often, skipped family dinners, and made excuses. But over time, it became open conflict. They worried Harold might take control of their mother's finances. They felt betrayed that Margaret was moving on after their father. Even the grandchildren became distant because of the family rift. Margaret thought she was adding love to her life, but instead, she lost peace. She spent her later years torn between the man she cared for and the family she had raised for decades. The joy of her remarriage was overshadowed by arguments, mistrust, and emotional distance. This is why senior life experts warn: when you remarry after 70, you're not just marrying a person, you're marrying into an entire web of emotions, memories, and expectations. And more often than not, families don't adjust as easily as we hope. Ask yourself, is it worth risking your bond with your children and grandchildren? Is it worth creating invisible walls in your family just to formalize a relationship? Companionship doesn't always need a marriage certificate, because while remarriage might bring you a new partner, it can also cost you the closeness of the people who have loved you all your life. This last reason is perhaps the most shocking and important one of all.